Welcome to Crime Maze. In this video we are going to talk about 5 murders that were solved 20 years later. So before starting this video, like this video, and subscribe to Crime Maze for future updates. The Golden State Killer frightened California people in the 1970s and 1980s. He stormed into people's houses, killed 9 individuals, and sexually assaulted 45 women. Following that, he would torment them with ominous phone calls and threats. The serial rapist has eluded capture for more than 4 decades. Then, in April of this year, James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer, was arrested in connection with the decades-old atrocities. Investigators were able to trace down their main suspect by comparing DNA from the crime scene to an online genetic profile of one of DeAngelo's relatives. Even though the Golden State Killer case took years to solve, it isn't the only one that has eluded officials for years. Insider looked back at some of the most difficult cold cases, which took years to solve. Number 5. Clarence Wayne Dixon was given the death sentence. Deanna Bowden, a 21-year-old college student, was found slain in her Tempe, Arizona, apartment on January 7, 1978. A belt was around her neck, and she had stab wounds on her chest. Police recovered male DNA on her underpants but were unable to connect it with anyone. According to ABC News, there were no leads over the next 23 years. The case was then handed over to Detective Tom Magazzini, who discovered that DNA from the crime scene matched Clarence Wayne Dixon, a 52-year-old former gas station employee who had resided 500 feet from Bowden's apartment, and was already serving a life term for another sexual assault. Dixon was charged with murder and sexual assault and was hauled back to court. According to ABC, he was convicted of the crime, and it took the jury 20 minutes to conclude that he merited the death penalty. He was still alive and serving his sentence as of the 2017 ABC piece. Deanna's mother, Bobby Bowden, told the East Valley Tribune, "We're really pleased. We're overjoyed, and it's something we were beginning to believe would never happen." Number 4. Stephanie Lazarus was charged with first-degree murder. Sherry Rasmussen was found shot and bludgeoned to death in the condo she and her husband occupied in 1986. According to ABC, police suspected 2 thieves broke in and murdered her, and the case went cold, but 27 years later, they discovered out the real tale. Stephanie Lazarus, a former Los Angeles police detective, was found guilty of murdering Rasmussen in 2012, after her saliva DNA was linked to a bite mark on the victim's arm. Prosecutors alleged Lazarus was enraged that her ex-partner had married Rasmussen and had resolved to get vengeance. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and given a sentence ranging from 27 to life in prison. Number 3. Osmond Bell was caught with a chewing gum piece. According to the BBC, Osmond Bell, a man who murdered his wife in 1981, was apprehended thanks to a piece of chewing gum. Nova Welsh was murdered, and her body was discovered in a cabinet in her Birmingham, England, house in 1981. Investigators were unable to solve the case for 35 years. The DNA on the chewing gum that held the cabinet locked together was then matched to Bell, Welsh's ex-partner. Investigators eventually discovered that their relationship had a habit of domestic violence, and that the death was likely in reprisal for Welsh dating someone new. Bell was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Welsh's mother, Lorna, said after the sentencing that her daughter may finally rest in peace. Number 2. DNA evidence tied Sheila Keane Warren to a murder. According to the Sun Sentinel, in May 1990, a woman dressed as a clown with a red nose, white makeup, and an orange wig drove to the residence of her lover's wife and shot her in the face. She then turned around, got in her car, and drove away for nearly 3 decades, evading capture. When authorities linked Sheila Keane Warren's DNA to hair recovered in the getaway vehicle in 2018, the 54-year-old was detained in connection with the crime. A former employee at Warren's restaurant also admitted to getting drunk one night, and confessing to murdering the wife of a man she was having an affair with, while disguised in a clown suit, according to authorities. Warren was chatty when she was escorted to the sheriff's office, but when she was told she had been detained in connection with the crime, she silently lay her head on the desk, according to the Sun Sentinel. She ultimately pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder and is being held without bond in jail. Justice may be delayed at times, but justice will be served, stated State Attorney Dave Arenberg. Number 1. Kenneth Hansen was sentenced to 200 years in prison. Police in Illinois were unable to find the horseman who murdered 3 young boys in a stable for nearly 40 years. When Robert Peterson, John Schwessler, and Anton Schwessler Jr. were hitchhiking after a day of movies and bowling in 1955, the man picked him up. According to the New York Times, he took the lads to his stable, sexually molested at least one of them, killed them, and then threw their remains into a forest preserve ditch. According to the Chicago Tribune, investigators questioned 43,740 persons, but were unable to find the perpetrator. Several persons had seemingly implicated 61-year-old Kenneth Hansen in the disappearance of the youngsters, during an investigation into the inexplicable disappearance of heiress Helen Voorhees Brach in 1994. He was charged with arson in connection with a fire that occurred in 1972. According to the New York Times, he was charged with the murders of all 3 boys later that day. The next year, he was found guilty and sentenced to 200 years in jail. In 2007, he passed away. The Chicago Tribune quoted John Rotuno, one of the special agents who assisted in Hansen's conviction, as saying, "It closes it. I've just gotten off the phone with Special Agent Jimmy Grady. He stated that this is a suitable conclusion to all of the agony. I'm relieved he's no longer alive." What do you think about this video? Which of the following 5 murders that were solved 20 years later you find most interesting? Do let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.